Is it a coincidence that I am sending you this message right now? No, it is not. This is one of the divine laws of the universe and heaven. Yes, the law of attraction. You feel very lucky that I am sending you this message, don't you? Before moving on to the message, please like the video to share this message with others, dear souls. Additionally, you must receive and accept the message with love. If you write "I received and accepted it with love" in the comments and seal it with 333, you will maintain the balance of giving and receiving. Don't forget to follow our other messages and subscribe, says Archangel Michael. Now we can slowly move on to the message. The chosen one, the veil will lift, and it is time for the person who claims to care about your relationship to finally see the reality of the situation. The person who was supposed to protect you is nothing more than an instrument of pure and focused hatred, spiritually annihilated by the highest being for daring to interfere with divine destiny. The person who lied to them by whispering poison in their ear while trying to impart advice has just faced the wrath of God in ways that have left no mistake about what happens when mortals attempt to play games with someone who is protected by the cosmos. And for those individuals who have taken a stand against you, the reason why the universe does not tolerate threats to its chosen vessels is going to be revealed. Your most intimate relationship had been giving you a nagging feeling for some months that something was off. It seemed as though the person you loved, the one who ought to have realized your divine essence right away, kept going back and forth between seeing you clearly and suddenly acting as if they needed more time to figure out who you were. Observing someone who was standing in broad daylight and trying to persuade themselves that the sun was not bright was like watching someone try to lie to themselves. There was a third party in this equation, someone tugging strings from the shadows, according to your gut, which kept screaming that there was. The spiritual deception effort that you were witnessing was the most significant one you had ever seen in your entire life. A master puppeteer who had their talons so deep in your person's mind that every time you showed up as pure divine energy, this concealed influence could speak poison and utterly alter the narrative. This was orchestrated by a master puppeteer. Your actions are a perfect example of what true love looks like. Being the living incarnation of divine collaboration and demonstrating your value via actions that would cause angels to shed tears can be accomplished by showing up. While this twisted energy was working in the background, it was methodically ruining every beautiful moment that you had created. The strategy employed by the puppet master was absolutely smart as hell. In order to build their manipulation, they had analyzed every uncertainty, fear, and wound that your person had experienced in the past. They had done this in the same way that a surgeon would execute psychological warfare. Whenever the depth of your connection increased, this manipulator would show up with urgent chats about how you were not being rational about your emotions. In the garb of care, they would plant the seeds of uncertainty, providing poison with a grin on their face, while asserting that they were only interested in the best. When they were toying with you, you weren't just any old person. The divine protection extends beyond those who have been appointed. It makes a concerted effort to track out anything that poses a threat to their mission. An airtight case that would make divine justice so comprehensive and indisputable that when it eventually dropped, there would be no appeals, no second chances, and no mercy for anyone who would try to mess with sacred matters have been being constructed by the Most High, who have been keeping a close eye on every action, chronicling every falsehood, and compiling an impregnable case. Connection or relationship. The people you care about started experiencing something that they were unable to identify. They were experiencing a growing sensation of disquiet that started out as whispers in their spirit and gradually developed into a roar that they could no longer ignore. Cracks began to appear in the foundation of their manufactured reality as a result of the cognitive dissonance that occurred between what they experienced with you and what they were being taught about you. They felt as though they had returned to their own world when they were with you. However, the interactions they had with their puppet master left them feeling disoriented, exhausted, and in some way less significant than they had been before. Your individual finally came to the realization that they had been sitting silent for an excessively long period of time, allowing this toxic influence to speak for them. This was the beginning of the breakthrough. Make decisions and think for them on their behalf. Imagining the terror of waking up and finding out that your own ideas have not been your own, that your views have been filtered through the agenda of someone else, and that your heart has been kept hostage by someone who has never had your best interests in mind is a terrifying thought. On the other hand, divine timing operates in strange ways, and the universe had been orchestrating something that was so flawless that when the revelation came, it would be hard to deny that it was divinely directed. Your individual was beginning to recognize patterns. This manipulator would suddenly come with dramatic crises, urgent chats, or cleverly contrived emergencies designed to lure them away from the truth that their heart was urgently trying to tell them. This situation would occur every time they felt the closest to you. The first significant mistake that the manipulator made was that they failed to recognize the developing spiritual awareness of the person they were manipulating. They made an excessive amount of effort, were excessively visible, and overtly displayed their hand. People who are desperate tend to be careless, and carelessness is what creates proof. The people you care about started asking questions that may be harmful. It is perplexing to me that you're the only one who speaks negatively of this wonderful spirit. In spite of the fact that you're someone who provides me such clarity, why does every interaction I have with you leave me feeling more confused? What is your motivation for putting so much effort on destroying something that makes me happy? As the manipulators became aware that their psychological hold was beginning to weaken, their feeling of desperation reached a fever pitch. They started engaging in increasingly audacious behavior, telling lies that were more blatant, and constructing scenes that were more spectacular. However, concealed within each and every falsehood are the seeds of its own demise. In addition, the truth has a way of coming to the surface, regardless of how deeply it is buried. It was your person who started connecting dots that they had been unable to connect in the past. This was not only about the friendship between you two. There was a history of this puppet master making an appearance whenever genuine bliss was within grasp, of destroying breakthrough moments, and of polluting every well of genuine love and success. When they took a step back and looked at the bigger picture, the pattern became so evident that they questioned how they had been spiritually blind for such a long time. Someone whose only true power came from their ability to make other people doubt themselves was the one who made your loved one learn that their mind had been invaded, their heart had been hijacked, and their future had been held hostage by that somebody. The scales did not simply fall from their eyes. Rather, they shattered altogether, revealing a reality that was so dissimilar to what they had been brainwashed to think that it caused them to lose their breath. After that, the events that transpired illustrate the moment when divine protection goes from being a passive observer to being an active participant. When the manipulator realized that they had completely lost control of the situation, they made increasingly desperate attempts to reestablish their psychological domination. The desperation that they felt led to the beginning of the revelation of their actual nature. The mask fell off, the facade broke, and it became impossible to conceal the truth about their ambitions, which was a very terrible truth. During the course of their investigation, your individual came across something that would rock them to their very core while simultaneously filling them with divine rage. It was not a case of careless intervention or a worry that was misdirected. The purpose of this was to prevent them from achieving their divine destiny through the use of systematic spiritual warfare. The puppet master had been observing them through the eyes of a predator, gaining an understanding of their vulnerabilities and concocting lies that were specifically intended to exploit their most profound fears and phobias. The law of divine justice operates simultaneously on a number of different levels. During the time that your individual was going through the process of waking, the highest power was working on arranging repercussions for the manipulator that would serve as both complete justice and complete protection. It was going to come back to them, multiplied, intensified, and focused into a perfect storm of karmic retribution that would leave no doubt about the reality of cosmic justice. This energy that they had been pouring out through their manipulative tactics was about to return to them. It was the manipulators who began, experiencing what can only be defined as a spiritual breakdown that is systematic in nature. The realization that people were seeing them for who they really were caused their own relationships to begin to fall apart. As an increasing number of people became aware of their manipulative tendencies, their reputation began to deteriorate. The spiritual poison that they had been spreading began to manifest itself in their current state of health. Their tranquility dissipated as the burden of their own poisonousness grew intolerable for them to bear. During this time, spiritual protection began to materialize around your circumstance in ways that could not be denied. There was a sudden influx of opportunities that could not be stopped by any human intervention. The formation of connections that could not be prevented by any amount of interference. Your way became plain in a manner that made it abundantly clear that the cosmos itself was preparing to celebrate your vindication and victory by laying out the red carpet. This person who had appeared to be so powerful, so influential, and so capable of dominating narrative suddenly revealed themselves to be what they had always been, a terribly wounded human whose only strength came from their ability to injure others. Your loved one watched in awe as this person suddenly revealed themselves to be these things. Once it was brought to everyone's attention that the emperor was naked, their entire empire of manipulation fell apart like a house of cards in the midst of a hurricane. As the manipulators' own strategies began to work against them, they began to employ surgical precision. When they returned home, the division that they had SWN came to roost in their own house. It was the manipulation that they had perfected that turned out to be the trap that caught them within. The poisonous patterns that they had used as weapons against other people turned out to be the very tools that led to their own demise. Your individual's awakening continued to deepen as they became aware of the full extent of what had been taken from them. It is not only their connection with you that is important. It is also their capacity to trust their own senses, their self-assurance in their own judgment, and their link with their own intuition. Your love tale had not been the only thing that the manipulator had messed with. Each and every aspect of your person's sense of self and spiritual autonomy has been colonized by individuals. In the same way that the manipulation had been harmful, the healing process became significantly more dramatic. It was necessary for the person you care about to acquire the ability to differentiate between their genuine voice and the voice of their manipulator, who had taken up residence in their mindset. It was necessary for them to reestablish their connection with their gut instincts, their own innate wisdom, and their own hearts. It was like learning to walk again after having your spiritual legs purposefully shattered and kept weak. It was a very different experience. The grace of God, on the other hand, includes everything that is required for total restoration. Furthermore, when your individual began to regain their spiritual sovereignty, they began to experience breakthrough after breakthrough one after the other. When they were exposed to the lies that they had been taught to believe about you, they began to dissolve like salt in water. As the reality became more apparent, the doubts that had been intentionally inserted into the mind started to go away. After being subjected to the lie that they had been subjected to, the dread that had been deliberately developed finally changed into justified fury. While the manipulator was witnessing their carefully designed control system fall apart, they made one last desperate attempt to restore power by a method that can only be characterized as spiritual terrorism. The entire arsenal of weapons that they possessed was unleashed. However, heavenly protection had become so powerful surrounding your circumstance that their attacks just bounced off like arrows hitting an unbreakable shield. Guilt, shame, dread, obligation, fake urgency created crisis, and emotional blackmail were all examples of these manifestations of divine protection. The ultimate release of your loved ones did not come about as a result of a dramatic confrontation, but rather as a result of a quiet, firm, and unwavering determination. You could say that they just quit taking part in the manipulation. They decided to cease answering calls that were intended to cause them to have doubts. They immediately stopped participating in chats that were designed to confound them. They stopped letting someone who had demonstrated that they were not deserving of such a profound trust to access their thoughts and emotions. The behavior of the manipulator when they realized they had lost control was not only predictable, but also pitiful. At the same time that they were desperately trying to drag other people into their web of deception in order to justify their distorted sense of reality, they started the process of disseminating lies, creating drama, and manufacturing crisis. However, divine justice had also been working toward this moment for quite some time, and with each lie that they spoke, they created additional evidence of their true character, which will be seen to anyone who has spiritual eyes. The behavior of the manipulators themselves became so openly toxic, so obviously manipulative, and so undeniably damaging that even their closest allies started to pull back. Their credibility vanished as quickly as the mist in the morning. The influence that they had completely disappeared. The foundation of their power was reduced to dust. Your person's awakening was finished when they finally realized that loving you had never been the actual question. This occurred when they finally comprehended that what had been at issue was whether or not they would opt for love rather than fear, truth rather than comfort, and progress rather than stagnation. The only reason the manipulator had been effective was because the person they were trying to manipulate was scared of the impact of what you represented, concerned about the alterations that would be necessary in order to love you, apprehensive about the possibility of becoming the kind of person they would have to be in order to match your heavenly vibration. On the other hand, the terror had been replaced by exhilaration. Confidence had been transformed into crystal clear vision, and uncertainty had been transformed into certainty through the process of alchemy. The person you were with was finally able to recognize you for who you truly were, not through the skewed perspective of manipulation, but rather through the unclouded vision of their spiritually awakened perception. The things that they witnessed caused them to lose their breath and led them to their knees in a state of appreciation for what they had thought they had lost. As the manipulator was forced to confront consequences on every level of their existence, the ultimate manifestation of divine justice was reached. Their poisonous relationships came to an end as a result of the weight of their revealed characteristics. Deception and manipulation became synonymous with their reputation as a result of their actions. After a considerable amount of time, their health started to reflect the spiritual poison that they had been spreading. As their mental state became more unstable, so did their financial situation. In the moment when they were confronted with the complete reality of who they had chosen to become, their mental tranquility vanished completely. In the meantime, benefits started pouring into your life with such clear evidence of heavenly orchestration that no one could disprove the fact that you were operating under the influence of supernatural favor. Doors that had been closed for many years were finally opened. Opportunities presented themselves that were beyond your wildest imagination. Your life was enriched by the presence of individuals who quickly and completely acknowledged your worth. It was as if the universe was compensating you for every moment of interruption that you had endured, and your spiritual gifts started acting at levels that you had never experienced before. Your loved one approached you not with the reluctance of someone who was still going through the process of being manipulated, but rather with the self-assurance of someone who had fought for their independence and triumphed decisively. Their arrival was accompanied by not only expressions of regret, but also indications of genuine transformation, genuine development, and genuine determination to never again permit anyone to taint their understanding of divine love. The awakening that they had experienced was thorough and total, and along with it came a tremendous protectiveness of what you represented in their lives. The conclusion of the manipulator's story turned out to be a cautionary tale that spread across your entire town from generation to generation. In their own lives, people started to recognize similar patterns of manipulation that had been occurring. Others were able to muster the bravery to unchain themselves from their own puppet masters. A wave of spiritual awakening was triggered as a result of the exposure of this one harmful influence, which blessed a great number of other relationships and situations with the light of truth. As this drama draws to a close, it is important to realize that the events that you have witnessed include much more than just your own personal vindication. You have witnessed the operation of divine justice in real time, which involved the destruction of forces that had the audacity to interfere with the sacred mission. This moment of complete triumph and absolute restoration has been the culmination of every moment of perplexity, every period of separation, and every season of doubt that has been building up to this point. It is the very deity that they believe they could outsmart that has been responsible for the gradual dismantling of the puppet master who believed they could play God with your fate. At this moment, the person you care about stands before you as someone who has been through the crucible of falsehood and emerged as pure gold. Understanding the significance of what they came so close to losing, acknowledging the uniqueness of what you stand for, and appreciating the price that must be paid for choose truth over lies that are more comfortable. There was more to the news that shocked your loved one to their very core than simply knowing that they had been manipulated. The discovery of the overwhelming degree of animosity that had been festering beneath the surface of their puppet masters, supposedly helping mask, was the factor that brought about this discovery. This was neither for protection nor for concern. This was sheer, unmitigated hatred that was masked as something that was wise. Every single word, every single suggestion, and every single bit of counsel that the manipulators had given you had been laced in venom that was deliberately aimed at destroying your holy light. There was a startling clarity with which your individual began to recognize the pattern. All the time that they had revealed something lovely about you, the manipulator's response had an undercurrent of poison in it. You were met with a veiled disdain for every accomplishment that you accomplished before. Every single precious moment of happiness that you brought into their lives was methodically sabotaged by skepticism that was meticulously constructed. Non-random interference was not the case here. And somebody whose hatred for your divine nature ran so deep that it had engulfed their entire existence was the one who carried out this targeted spiritual assassination. This animosity on the part of the manipulators was not the result of anything you had done to them. The things that you stood for were the source of their anger. In a world where they had chosen to immerse themselves in darkness, divine authenticity was present. In a world where they had chosen to crawl, they had a moment of spiritual exaltation. Without a doubt, love in a world where they had made the conscious decision to spread poison. Your very presence revealed everything that they were not, everything that they had refused to become, and all that they had rejected in order to keep their toxic grip on other people. Everything that your loved one believed they knew about the breadth of this spiritual warfare will be completely altered as a result of what they discovered next. It wasn't simply the manipulator who had been operating by themselves. They had been a member of a network of forces that were harmful to them. Everyone was brought together by their same prejudice against genuine divine energy. Individuals who were related by their inability to tolerate genuine spiritual light in their midst, including members of their family, friends, and associates. In order to undermine your link, they had decided to form an unofficial partnership. Each of them is contributing to the systematic destruction of your love story in their own unique way. However, despite the fact that the plot was not official or planned in any conventional sense, it was extremely successful due to the fact that it was united by mutual anger and jealousy toward your holy frequency. On the other hand, These individuals could not bear to witness another person have the kind of love and spiritual connection that they had either never had or had made the conscious decision to eradicate from their own life. Their preoccupation grew to include your satisfaction. Their suffering depends on your achievement. The divine essence that you possess serves as a constant reminder to them of what they had chosen not to cultivate inside themselves. Your individual started remembering discussions with a scary new clarity than before. Events that took place within the family in which your name was brought up, and the atmosphere immediately switched to one of condemnation. Conversations concerning your relationship were met with eye rolls and comments that were disparaging in social circles where you were involved. Circumstances in your work life in which your accomplishments were marginalized or questioned. There was no attempt to conceal the hatred. It was delivered with smiles that never reached their eyes, disguised as worry and packaged as knowledge. It had been normalized after being disguised as concern. Every single person who had taken part in this campaign of hatred was about to be subjected to the full force of the cosmic correction. Those who are chosen are not the only ones protected by the highest. Dismantling structures that are designed to stifle divine purpose is something that the universe does actively. The events that followed would serve as an immortal testament to the fact that no coalition of hatred can prevail against the will of the divine. The mask that the manipulators wore started to falling apart in ways that made their true nature unmistakable. Their carefully maintained mask broke down in times of desperation, exposing the anger that had been the driving force behind every encounter they had been having between them. It is impossible for your loved one to continue to believe that this individual had ever had their best interests in mind because they witnessed eruptions of pure malice like the ones described above. It became quite evident that this individual's entire identity had been constructed around the idea of opposing your holy light because the hatred was so blatant, so visceral, and so all-consuming. Hatred, on the other hand, carries the seeds of its own destruction, regardless of how well organized or persistent it may be. The sheer depth of their fixation with preventing your divine mission from being carried out became evidence of the enormous spiritual power that you possess. It is not common for people to organize campaigns directed against regular Americans. They are only able to channel such hatred toward those individuals whose light threatens their darkness, whose truth exposes their lies, and whose love betrays their emptiness. When the person you care about discovered that they had been surrounded by people whose primary bonding activity was disliking you, the divine insight achieved its pinnacle. At family dinners, the topic of conversation was always your shortcomings. The common resentment that they have for your achievement brings together groups of friends. Social circles that are arranged according to the premise of limiting the impact that you have on the victim that they have chosen. Due to the fact that the hatred had become so widespread, so commonplace, and so widely accepted, your individual had almost started to believe that it was natural and justified. In order to demolish this network of hatred, divine justice worked with the precision found in surgical procedures. In a sequential manner, the individuals who took part in this plot started to experience effects that were a perfect fit for their involvement in the dissemination of poison. Individuals who had been whispering lies discovered that their own words had been perverted against them. Those who had deliberately seeded seeds of uncertainty realized that their own foundations were falling apart. Those individuals who have spread hatred found themselves in a position of isolation as their poisonous character became apparent to everyone in their immediate vicinity. The support system of the manipulator crumbled like dominoes, falling in perfect sequence, and your loved one stared in awe as it happened. Those individuals who had previously supported the hatred by nodding their heads began to distance themselves as they became aware of the toxic environment they had been enabling. It was then that friends who had taken part in the character assassination began to experience their own relational instability. Those members of the family who had participated in the campaign of hatred saw that their own connections were eroding as a result of the outward manifestation of their hatred. The final, desperate attempt that the manipulators made to keep their power exposed the entire extent of their spiritual illness. They started making statements that were more ridiculous than ever before, stating lies that were more obvious all the time, creating circumstances that were more theatrical, and demanding more extreme allegiance from their remaining allies. But the desperation that they were experiencing had caused them to act recklessly, and their true character became so apparent that even their most ardent followers started to question all that they had been told. As soon as your individual discovered that the manipulator's animosity had not only been intended at you, they went through a tremendous spiritual awakening. In every aspect of their own existence, it had been a poisonous substance. It had been filtered through the lens of someone whose hatred for heavenly light extended to anyone who might experience it, including their own supposed loved ones. Every dream that had been discouraged, every opportunity that had been questioned, and every moment of joy that had been reduced had all been filtered through this lens. As a result of the revelation, your individual's comprehension of their entire past with the manipulator was completely altered. The thing that they had considered to be protection turned out to be control. What they had considered to be discernment turned out to be manipulation. The thing that they had come to accept as love turned out to be a love disguised as a possession. The anger that had been directed at you was merely the most obvious evidence of a spiritual illness that had been poisoning every relationship that this person had any kind of contact with. At the same time as the hatred of the manipulators became completely apparent, the spiritual barriers that had been quietly safeguarding you from the most severe of their attacks were obvious to the person you care about. After some time, they started to recognize instances in which their intentions to harm you had inexplicably failed. Instances in which lies about you were suddenly uncovered, as well as instances in which attempts to undermine your reputation have resulted in significant failure. Divine justice had been operating behind the scenes the entire time, transforming every weapon that was constructed against you into evidence of your spiritual protection. Your individual's awakening gained momentum when they came to the realization that the manipulator's hatred had been their own personal jail. Due to the fact that this individual had devoted a significant amount of their time and energy to the destruction of your light, they had entirely disregarded their own spiritual development. Their preoccupation with what would happen to you had turned into their own personal spiritual death sentence. Their hatred had eaten them to such an extent that there was almost any trace of the person they could have been if they had chosen love rather than malice throughout their lives. Your individual underwent a profound metamorphosis in the way that they viewed not only you, but also the entire spiritual landscape of their life, as the full magnitude of the conspiracy became obvious to them. When it came to other relationships, they started identifying hostility that was misrepresented as concern. Eventually, they began to recognize instances of deception that were disguised as wisdom in other links. They were able to cultivate spiritual discernment, which rendered them resistant to any future assaults on their understanding of the truth that comes from God. As the network of hatred that the manipulators had created turned on itself, their downfall intensified. As a result of the absence of your light as their shared adversary, these poisonous individuals started channeling their venom onto one another. As it turned out, alliances that were founded on a mutual loathing proved to be fragile foundations for any type of connection that would persist. Rather than being brought down by pressure from the outside, the conspiracy was brought down by the internal inconsistencies that are inherent in any institution that is built on negativity and hatred. Because of the proof of the hatred campaign that surfaced in ways that made it hard to deny its existence, your vindication became complete. During the course of the systematic campaign that had been launched against your character and your connection, your loved one discovered preserved messages, recorded conversations, documented plans, and written evidence of the campaign. Anyone who had ever questioned your spiritual insight was forced to accept that your discernment had been completely accurate, since the proof was so overwhelming, so thorough, and so indisputable. Give that idea a moment of your attention. For something that is of the utmost significance, I seek your attention. Through this weekly Zoom call, we're going to share everything that we know about personal power, healing yourself, and healing others. There will be no inhibitions or filters. Since we have been practicing spirituality for literally years, we have been silently contributing all of the esoteric secrets that we have accumulated. It is now possible for anyone who are prepared to follow the same path to have access to the skills and knowledge that allowed us to convert from controlled pawns into conscious creators. This is your invitation to become a member of the Obsidian Inner Order and to support our platform. By doing so, we will be able to continue expanding our megaphone and reaching new individuals who have been selected and are currently waiting to be activated. By becoming a member of the Obsidian Inner Order, you will not only be able to obtain access to information that is restricted. As you join this movement, you are becoming a part of something that is rewriting reality itself. We have all come out on top in every way. A link can be found in the description. When your beloved comes to you, they bring with them more than just an awakened knowledge. They bring with them the intense protectiveness of someone who has seen personally the extent of hatred that your divine nature aroused and which you ultimately triumphed against. It is not just perplexity or doubt that has put your love for one another to the test. Rather, it is a methodical spiritual assault that is aimed to destroy everything precious that is associated with your connection. A victory over forces of darkness that appear to be insurmountable is represented by the decision to love you despite the immense strain that you are under. Outside of the realm of personal vindication, the cosmic lesson encompasses the realm of universal spiritual law. Each and every selected individual who walks this earth has a light that is so potent that it automatically reveals the hatred that is concealed inside the hearts of those around them. The very fact that you exist acts as a mirror, compelling individuals to confront the things that are contained within their own souls. Those who are filled with love are able to perceive and appreciate your heavenly frequency, but those who are hiding hatred are obliged to show their actual character through the way in which they react to your presence. The triumph you have achieved goes beyond merely achieving personal success. It is a cosmic example of how the universe protects its chosen vessels. The campaign of hatred, which appears to be so overwhelming, becomes a witness to the spiritual worth of your contributions. An organized opposition is not something that is inspired by ordinary people. It is only those who bear light that can change the world that are subject to such systematic hostility. There is a direct correlation between the enormity of your spiritual mission and the severity of their animosity. Recognize that each and every assault that you have survived has reinforced your spiritual armor as you stand in complete vindication about yourself. Each deception that you have conquered has developed your discernment. Through each and every instance of hatred that you have faced, your potential for divine love has grown. As a result of the powers that intended to destroy you, you have instead been transformed into an instrument of divine will that cannot be stopped, carrying light that is so brilliant that it compels adversaries to reveal their own darkness in its entirety by means of their fruitless efforts to lessen what the Most High has commanded to shine.